Hello, hello. Welcome to this episode of the Confident Woman Lead podcast. I'm your host, Anita Miller, and today we're going to have a guest. We're going to talk about burnout today, and I'm going to introduce my guest, and then we'll get started just with some conversation about burnout. Okay, so my guest today is Nurse Aneesha, and she is founder of the Nurses Circle. So make sure you go to Instagram and you connect with her, especially if you're a nurse, or share it with someone you know is a nurse so that they can build a community. They have community just for nurses. She's going to talk to us about burnout. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it from my experience, both personally and coaching other women. And we're going to talk about it from the grand perspective of all women, regardless of where your career is or what industry it's in. So I know you guys hear me talk a little bit about professional or corporate, and I've been told that not everybody sees themselves in that category. This podcast is for everyone, and today we're covering everyone on either end of the spectrum of careers that we can have, especially as women of color. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Coach Aneesha so she can tell us a little bit more about herself now.
Thank you so much, Anita, and everyone listening to this podcast. I'm super excited to be here and having this conversation about burnout that is so important. So, a little bit about myself. As Anita said, I am Aneesha Nelson. I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for over 11 years at this point. Been in healthcare all my life. So, I've been in healthcare for over 25 years. I did a little bit of medical research. I've worked in the hospital setting, administrator, management, you name it. I've done it, been there, got the t-shirt. It's been absolutely amazing. I am a wife. I am the mother of four beautiful children, one set of twins. I love what I do at home. I still am a career nurse as Anita shared, I am the founder of the Nurses Circle, a community that I am building, continue to build, that really helps nurses to overcome burnout, empower them to their next level, and really a space where we can come together. I realized that in nursing, there wasn't a space for us to come together to get the support, to get the development in terms of not just nursing, but also our personal lives, finding that balance so we don't hit that burnout. And so that's a little bit about me and what I do. And I'm so excited, like I said, to have this conversation with you, Anita, today.
Awesome. I love it. And I think what I love most about what you said is the shared goal around community. Um, there's so many women today who, between work and raising the kids and marriage and all the things that we have, or even if those aren't the things, then coming home and like, okay, what do I do now after work? I've had friends that I've talked to about that. And having community, how important it is to have community, a place where you can gather with like minds and be able to not just make a connection professionally, but to also be able to make it personal, to have conversations about our lives, because all of it impacts each other, right? What we do at work, especially for women, we take home a lot more, right? So even though I know this because my husband is a nurse, even though in my mind, you can leave nursing at the hospital versus me and working in banking and bringing my laptop home and having to log into the computer, after hours, I did not realize the emotional toll he brings home, especially having worked on the floor in the hospitals here in our area. So I I love what you guys do. My husband does it. I'm actually the person that like filled out the application so he could go to nursing school. He had a degree in biology. We needed to do something with that. And what was happening here wasn't working, so we had to try something new. But okay, let's get started. Let's start with the obvious question. And so this is a question for you, Coach Aneesha. What is burnout?
So, burnout. I'll tell you what my definition of burnout and what it might look like as well. So, burnout is when, I'll give an example. You come home from work, you are tired, you can't move on to the next thing. As they say, you kick the dog, scream at the kids. It looks like I'm exhausted. I have nothing else left to give. I don't have it to give. I don't want to give it. and I'm just tired. Emotional, mental, physical stress. It looks like um, I don't want to do this anymore. I've done it. I'm done with it and I'm moving on. And so, and I think you said it best, Anita. It ultimately affects every area of our lives. So when we burn out at work, we burn out at home because we don't leave work and leave ourselves there. We take ourselves wherever we go. And even in home, if we burn out, if we don't have systems in place, like we talk about business systems in place in our business, if we don't have systems in place at home, then we burn out at home, then we take that to work as well. And so, like you said, it is a system. Burnout is something that we have to learn how to harmonize, balance, whatever word you resonate with, so that we don't burn out both ends of the candlestick and can't function. Some people end up in the hospital because they're completely burnt out. Some people realize that, okay, I'm tired, I come home, I go right to sleep, I'm not eating, I'm not exercising, I'm gaining weight. That might be burnout for somebody else. But the main goal is that we want to stop it before it gets to that point. So stress leads to burnout.
My next question is, as you said that, what came to me, and I have heard some other people mention it. Um, for me, I didn't think or know I was a burnout. So I've been in the coaching space some time. I've heard burnout coaches. What I thought burnout looks like is not kind of what I was experiencing, or maybe what we experience as across cultures. Let me say it that way, right? And so is burnout those days where you pull into your garage and you just sit in your car till somebody looks out the door to see if you really made it home? Like, I'm trying to qualify the point at which we have crossed over to being real close or over to burnout. I mean, I'm gonna go in the house, like I'm home, but I just need a minute to try to get myself together to start, the next part of my day. Because work has left me exhausted because I'm already exhausted and now I have to go into the house and I've been talking all day and the kids are going to want to talk to me. The husband wants some attention and all of those things. And I don't have it to give. This is why I'm sitting in the car. And why are you looking out the door? You're laughing at me. I'm so serious. And I haven't done this in a while because I haven't worked in corporate, but I've, I've been full time in my business, but I can like close my eyes and picture it.
Yeah, that's so funny you said that because so no, pulling up in front of your house and sitting in your car and taking 15 minutes before, I like to say, take off one hat and put on the other, that's not necessarily burnout. To me, I call that self-care. And it was funny when you mentioned it because I'm like, I do that sometimes. If I've worked I call it my silent investor. If I was at my silent investor and it was just a long day, not even a crazy day, just a long day. And I'm like, okay, like you said, I'm going to go in this house. The kids are going to hit me at the carpet before I can put my pocketbook down. And they're going to want all of me 100%. I don't have it right now. So let me take 5, let me take 15. Sometimes I'll do it at work before I even hit reverse and pull out the parking lot or the garage. Sometimes I'll do it when I get home and pull into the driveway. I'll sit and decompress because I'm like, okay, let me get rid of the first part of my day so that I can be effective for the next part of my day. So that is not burnout. That is actually a form of self-care that I feel like some people need to do because we start off in one area and we leave in the morning, hit the ground running, and we on to the next thing and we never stop. That can burn us out when we don't take the time to sit down, self-care or self-maintenance, whatever it is that you need, so that way you don't end up there and you take care of yourself along the way. So I'm so glad you mentioned that because that is actually something that I practice frequently.
I love the distinguishment. Okay, so now that we're starting to have some boundaries or some clarity around, okay, well, if it's not when I'm sitting in my car, you talked earlier about stress. Is it when the stress starts to give me migraines or high blood pressure or some other ailment in my body because I'm going, and I'm telling myself that I have to do all of these things?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that is a good point. So when you get to the point where it's affecting you physically, your blood pressure is going up, like you said, you're having migraines, really bad headaches. You can't even focus. You're having a hard time making decisions. Like you could say, well, I'm not sure if I want to do this or that, but you are mentally like, I am at the point where I mentally cannot make this decision because you don't have that capacity. You are absolutely in burnout. You are absolutely at that point where you can't make those decisions. You can't physically function. There's one thing to be tired and have a long day and like, okay, I just need to take a break to regroup. But when you get to the point where it's affecting how you move, when you're at work and you can't make sound decisions about the work that you're doing because you're like burnout, or you're making decisions that are either inappropriate or incorrect, you're having problems processing, you get into, a misunderstanding or expressing yourself to a coworker, a patient, a boss, even a family member. And because you're lashing out and you're not taking the time to process, sometimes we can contribute that or attribute that to it was just a rough day. But when you have those consistently, you might want to look at, okay, you've crossed the line, like I said, from stress over into burnout. So, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question based on what you just said, of course. But what came to me is, especially for Black women, those days where I'm trying to keep it together. I'm trying to smile for the folks. I'm trying to do all the things. But like you said, I'm lashing out and it's a thing. But to me, I can't see the thing.
Mm,
Because I've been holding all the things in my body because everybody tells us we have to keep it together. And that's for all women, right? We're to smile, we're to be polite and in the South nice and keep it together. Right. And so if we have to keep it together, I'm pushing down these emotions while I see the physical, I don't necessarily see how I am showing up and how it's my problem versus maybe my race and people projecting back on me.
mm. That's good. So I think that kind of goes back to being open. And so if I feel like I'm lashing out and it's like maybe this is a cultural thing, maybe it's because I'm a angry black female, right? And it's not so much. But when your husband mentions it, your sister mentions it, your coworker who is of light color, she looks just like you, she sounds like you. She's like, sis, you haven't like you've been a little a little on edge these last couple of days. So when you're hearing from different people and from different perspectives, then at that point it takes, you know what? All right, I'm not just hearing it from these people who I think are just putting a stigma on me, but maybe it's something I need to look at within me. Maybe it is, maybe I am. And then somebody might say, girl, you are burnt out. And you're like, no, I'm not. So then after time, I think we have to stop and say, okay, let me self-reflect and think about this is not just a once occurrence thing. This is not something that just happened one time. This seems to be ongoing. And she mentioned it, he mentioned it, my daughter mentioned it, the baby mentioned like, I need to really sit down and take a self-evaluation to see. Most of the time when people are burnt out, like I said, sometimes it's hard to make that, to process that whole situation that I mentioned. But at some point, we have to say, okay, I'm hearing this from many different people. Maybe I am burnout. Maybe I need to take a break, take a vacation, sit back. And I think sometimes when we take some, like I said before, that self care and that self maintenance to step away from it, then we can decompress for a minute and evaluate the situation to say, you know what? It's not just the angry black female. It's not just a bad day at work. I am burnout and I need to recover from it.
Okay. I want to add to that that you can be burnt out on the experience that you're having in the workplace where you are. But what I like to tell the women in my community is this: you have to make a decision here. You have to make a decision because if you don't want to go to work, you're telling yourself that you have to. And the longer you do that, the more exhausted, the more into burnout, the more you'll try to overcompensate where you don't need to, the more there will be some lashing out because your patients just can't get it there. And the more that you do that, it will also impact your ability to get a new job once you finally get there because you're still holding on to all of the things that led to burnout, right? So I tend to say when the people show you who they are, when they show you where you stand, this is another point that Coach Aneesha made. It's a point to self reflect and say, am I okay with I'm not going to get promoted? They have clearly decided I'm not going to get promoted, whether they say it directly or not. I'm not going to get whatever I want next out of this corporation or this company that I want for my career. Is that okay? And be honest with yourself about whether or not that is okay. That is the point at which you, from a career perspective, you want to shift because every day you sit past that day, things get harder and it gets harder to transition past that point too. If you found your good job once, it was not a fluke. It was not an anomaly. It was not by accident. It wasn't because your cousin, sister, uncle had referred you and you got that job. It was because you are capable, because you are awesome, because you are wonderful. So, as the gospel song says, if he did it before, he can do it again. So, if it was done once, it can be done again. You can do that, but you have to believe that you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to transition a little bit to say, okay, so maybe I'm doing some self reflection, but I still don't see it. And here's what I'll say in terms of my experience. I didn't realize that I was burnt out. Like again, I heard it, but the way people was talking about it was like outside of the scope of how we think about life. It was a little softer, if you will, right? It was a little experiences that didn't necessarily resonate with what I was experiencing. Um, I didn't realize I was burnt out until I left corporate to work full time in my business. And for all of you who want to transition or are in the parts of transition, have left because of a layoff or something and want to start your own thing, I'm going to encourage you to bake in time to rest before you get started. Do not try to hit the ground running, especially if you're a woman of color, because the minute that you stop telling yourself you have to go somewhere, right? We are all trained that if we have to be to this job, no matter what the time is, we're going to get to that job because that's what we have to do. When it comes to working for yourself, there is no have to. I mean, you will need to create it. It's a lesson learned. But in the beginning, you don't have that muscle yet because you haven't been using it in terms of managing yourself and managing your time, therefore managing your business. And for me, what happened was the exhaustion hit me like a ton of bricks. And it threw me and my husband. Like I remember him saying, like, I don't understand what's wrong. You didn't want to, like, you wanted to work full time in your business. You're here. And I'm like, I'm just not emotion. Like I want to be emotion in my mind, but my body is like, girl, sit on that couch. Like it's like I can't get up. And I remember I can't think of the name of the magazine, but one of their executives had left because she talked about burnout. I remember reading that article and I did the research to be like, okay, what is burnout? What does it look like? And I still couldn't get to how do I move forward? So I'm going to ask you, Coach Aneesha, when we find ourselves in burnout, like how do we move forward? Like what are the steps that we take? And let's start with if you're currently working, right? If you're still actively working, what would be the steps we would take? And then maybe let's transition to if you're someone like me, because a lot of women of color have side gigs and or are starting businesses or have both. Can you kind of cover like what the options could be amongst that?
Yeah. So you said so many good things here, Anita. So if you are someone who still works a 9 to 5, a careerpreneur, a nursepreneur, whoever you are, there are a lot of resources that our companies will provide for you if you feel like you're in burnout, whether it's and it's going to depend, like you said, Anita, how burnout is showing up for you. If there are some health issues that you're having, let's address those health things that are going on. If there's somebody that you need to talk to, most companies will give you 3 or 4 complimentary sessions with someone to talk to say, okay, let me talk this out and see what is going on. Where is it that I need to make adjustments? And the other thing, I always laugh. I think about I don't remember if it was on TikTok or Instagram when it was like a thing was like PTO, prepare the others because I'm not coming. Learn how to use your PTO time if you are a 9 to 5 or career driven woman. You know why they give us the time? So we can take it. I talk to so many people that says, "Oh, I got 4 weeks of vacation." Why do you have 4 weeks of vacation sitting? Why? Some people say, "Oh, because when I eventually leave, I can just cash out and get the money." You've already cashed out mentally and physically. So let's use that time, because taking a day here, taking a week here, people say, "Well, I don't have any vacation plan." If you take that week off and you just sit home and do nothing and get caught up on your shows while the kids are at school or nobody's home, don't feel like I've wasted a week of vacation and didn't do anything. I think we have to learn how to take breaks in between. So first start off by figuring how burnout is showing up for you, and take it one step at a time. Like I said, if it's medical, get that taken care of. If it's someone you need to talk to, do that. If it's just like, sis, I need to drink more water, get you an app and help you drink more, whatever it looks like for you. Start taking those small steps towards making it happen. And then for our folks who are entrepreneurs who don't have to, clock in and out and answer someone, we have to learn to take breaks as well. I'm on both ends of the spectrum, and so I get it. You got to take breaks. I think sometimes I've heard people say, you can sleep when you're dead. However, if you don't get rest, that might come a little sooner than you think. So we have to learn how to, even in our businesses, to set up, put systems in place so that way we can account for the breaks. You can't work sun up to sundown and be effective in your business. You can't work sun up to sundown and be able to serve the people who are in your community, the people who are in your programs effectively, if we don't get the rest and the support that we need. It also looks like taking those self-care moments to take care of yourself. A walk around the park, a massage, whatever it is for you. If it's something that you need to do that keeps you going, then you do that. If it's something that you need to add to your regimen, so that way you can stay in a place of feeling good about who you are and where you are, then do that as well. But definitely make sure you get the support and the help that you need initially, and then figure out, okay, so I don't end up back here. What can I do to continue in this process? And not everybody's going to agree. They're going to say, "Girl, you said, this is what I need from me." And being okay with saying, I love to have my cup filled and overflowing than half empty, trying to figure out where the rest of it is. So we got to make sure that as women, as entrepreneurs, as moms, we love to say, we can do all the things. We can do all the things. However, at what cost? So I hope that was helpful, Anita.
It was so helpful. Okay, so many things. I'm going to start a little bit back at the beginning, because what I heard you say was, um, you can use what I'll call EA or employee assistance to kind of get those free conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
what came to me as I coach people, so for those of you who have been following, but those of you who are new to the podcast or listening to this because you're in Aneesha's community, I coach in two spaces, one in my business, and I do career coaching, but I also coach business owners. And in most cases, when it's a woman, she's either taking a break because she was burned out, and so she's left a corporate gig or some type of gig, or she's trying to do both, that show up kind of in what are my confidence and mindset coaching calls in that community. But what I'll hear in both communities is things like, "Oh, but I don't want to talk to a stranger. Oh, that's not really for real. I don't want my company to know what, like, that I have problems, or that I don't want them to think that I have problems," and things like that. So I think when we talk about talking to someone, mental health comes up. And sometimes in the beginning, we don't see how the mental and physical work together. And so, what would you say if that was my response?
And it's funny you say that, because I just finished reading one of Joyce Meyer's books, Battlefield of the Mind, and now I'm reading Power Thoughts. And I always say it all starts in the mind. So if we mentally realize that we can or can't do something, our words are going to follow by our actions, and so forth and so on. And so not wanting to speak to a complete stranger about what you have going on sometimes is a good thing. You know why? Because that person has no bias, has no um what do you call it, they're not vested in any way to say I agree or disagree based on how I know you in the past or how I see you moving forward. But sometimes to get that opinion, or to sit and share with somebody and for them to give you that advice that nobody never told you, right? An advice that somebody wanted to tell you but didn't know how you would take it. I think we have to be open to that. I know sometimes in our society and our culture, like you shared, Anita, I don't want to talk to a complete stranger about my business and let them know what you share is confidential. And if you don't tell anybody else, nobody will know. I don't know, you're saying, yeah, everybody has somebody that they tell something to, right? But we have to get out of that mindset of, um, I don't want anybody to know what's going on with me, because those are the very same people that, as you said, as we're talking about, who burn out because they don't have the space to share with somebody. And then, quite frankly, the people who we're sharing with our problems with, they can't help us anyway. So I say, what do you have to lose? Nothing. Go take the session. If you decide after the first session that, this is not for me, after the second one, yeah, I don't know if I'm coming back, then that's fine. But at least you tried something. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain, especially when you're in the stage of, I'm burnt out and clearly what I'm doing is not working. So what else is there left to do?
Love it. What I'll say, because a lot of people ask me this question, you can do all three. So when I say all three, the majority of the women in Confident Women Lead are believers. They may believe in a variation of beliefs, but they are believers, right? A majority of my women, and sometimes I recommend it, are also in therapy because we're carrying so much. And by the time we get to burnout, we are in our late 30s, early 40s. And so, with that many decades of life, from childhood to working to experiences with other relationships, we tend to be carrying so many things that are impacting our body that they're doing that. So, they're still functional adults, they're still going to work, but therapy is helping them, especially if they're having problems at work, to also process past trauma with what has happened. And then they have me as their coach, or maybe even Coach Aneesha in her community to move forward with, right? So coaching can help you move forward. But what I find is a lot of times, if you haven't taken care of the burnout piece, if you haven't taken care of the mindset piece, we do a lot of mindset work in my space in Confident Women Lead because it comes up. But you can operate cleaner and faster from a healthier place. And it's a place from which seeing a therapist kind of would cover and helping you kind of get back to point A, point B, whichever point in yourself you're looking um, to get to. And I'm gonna flip the question a little bit based on something I just said, but something you said to that is I often have to tell my younger members to slow down. And so I have several younger members who are still technically, mid-career, but earlier in their career for those of us who, are, are a bit older, right? And I want them to slow down because they're trying to do all the things all at once, but they're going so fast that I know that if you're 33 going this fast and you're trying to make director and you're trying to get a PhD and you're trying to, have a family and you have a husband and you still want your own life, when you add all those things together, it's going to be cute in the beginning. But about 38, 39, it's going to start to wear on you. And about 40, you're going to feel it real hard. And so, for those of us who are, let's say, in our 40s and above, who have had some time in career, who have lived some life, I think we also have to remember when we say we don't want to tell somebody two things. If we don't tell anybody, no one can help. And so, therefore, we've isolated ourselves and we're carrying it alone. And that don't mean just tell anybody. If you have to be discerning about who you tell. Don't tell people that you know can't help you. Like, I mean, seriously, we know. We put friends in categories of I call this person for this. Like, you gotta build community around where your community best helps you and the way that you best thrive. What I'll say is we as, let's say, Generation X or older millennials have to be thoughtful of the impression and the legacy that we live for the younger generations. These babies who are, and I say babies, but they're not, they're grown women technically, right? But who are younger than us, they're effectively doing the same things we did. In a sense, it's important that we catch them earlier and tell them, hey, when you was growing up, I know you saw us doing this. I see it in my daughter who's 27. Her hustle, her trying to get all the things, her trying to make six figures at 27, her trying to just overcompensate because she wants to show me that she can do it. She wants to do what I did. She wants to do it faster and sooner and earlier. But I have to tell her to slow down because she's going to burn out and they're going to burn out earlier, right? Because the workplace, even though we might not can see it for generations behind us, is progressing some. So if you were generations, let's say I'm in my 40s, if you were the pioneers, I call them, it wasn't moving. For us who are trailblazers, it did move some for us. I mean, it might have been hard to get it to move, and we might have had to work twice as hard to get it to move, but it did. The generation of younger millennials and those after them coming into is moving faster in terms of hierarchy and progression and things like that. It's moving faster for them. And so they think it's something at the end of the rainbow other than burnout. And so, how do you tell young people what's to come and get them to listen?
Is that a real question? Get them to listen. And you said so many good things. I'm going to start what you said. I'm going to go back to what you said at the very beginning. You said the three things I think are so important, as you said, is whatever your belief is, you definitely need to tap into that. As I know somebody who has a line that says Jesus and therapy. You need both. They both work together. You need both, right? And then, like you said, a community, a space that you can find yourself in that gets you, that understands you, right? If I'm a nurse, I'm not going to be in a community with a bunch of construction workers because they have no idea of what I go through as a nurse. What they go through on the construction streets are totally different. But when I can find myself in a community, because you know what, the other thing I realize is sometimes I'll say, because I'm a nurse, we as nurses don't realize that you're not the only person going through that. And so to be in an environment where you can share and realize you go through that same thing too. That's happened to you. It really helps us because then there may be somebody who can give some advice or support to me that I didn't even think about. Right. And having a coach that can say, okay, I can direct you in this area. Have you thought about this? Have you considered this? Let's try this. So I just wanted to circle back when you said that. I'm like, yeah, you definitely need all three. Now, how do you help these young people to listen? Well, I think it's a challenge, like you said, Anita, because they look back at us and they saw where we were, what we did to get to where we are. And they say, I'm going to do just that. But then in hindsight, we're like, yeah, don't do what I did. Do what I'm telling you to do now. But I think we have to be able to show them as well. So, yeah, you saw my children are younger, but for those who have old, I look back at my mom, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But then even with my younger children, I'm realizing that they're watching me. So instead of me saying, no, don't do that, I have to show them what that looks like. Because I think when people can see what it looks like and what you're doing, then it makes it a little easier than saying, hey, don't do this, do this. But when I can show you what I'm doing and say, this is what I believe will help you, because when I did what you're doing, remember, this is how I ended up. And so I think it's definitely a conversation. And it's like you say, some people are just gonna want to touch and feel and do and realize you were right. I shouldn't have done that. But we at least have to start with having that conversation, encouraging them, dropping those little seeds every now and again, and actually being that model so that they can see you doing it in real time as opposed to telling me something that you've never tried before. Especially with this generation, they're like, I need to be able to see that works. You can't just tell me. And so by showing you, I think that can support and encourage them to do it. And the other thing, one last thing I realized is that with these younger people, and I don't know, maybe we were the same way, is that you have to constantly repeat yourself over and over again. So it's not just a one-time thing. It's like, okay, maybe I need to share this in a different way. But I think that repetition until they get it and showing up as the example, absolutely, absolutely will change the trajectory for them.
That's so good. I love your response to that. I really, really do. And off the cuff. I love it. And I love it because growing up, when I think about the things that I hold with me and my husband have had this conversation where we talk about, um, especially my son, um, to your point, the repetition. Like my daughter, she could be told once.
Mm-hmm.
I have a pretty big gap. I have a 10-year gap, right? So my daughter could be told one. My son, you gotta say it multiple times. And my husband has a saying like, if you don't do it with him, it's not gonna get done. And you can be upset about that, but it's exactly what you just said. I know how to make a bed because I did it with my grandmother. I know how to cook because I did it with my grandmother. I know how to, put myself together as a lady, as a woman, because I did those things sitting on my grandmother's bed, looking in her mirror on her dresser, right? Like, so I think we forget that somebody did teach the majority of us, that we did have teachers, whether they were in our homes or somewhere else, and we just want to tell them. And so I think that that is such a great point and one that I hadn't thought about. And then talking, we have to let go of the mindset that I got to keep it all to myself. It's killing us. It's killing us as women because we don't want the next woman to do, regardless of race. It's killing those of us who are in the Black community or out culturally, not sharing with people. And here's the thing, when you don't share or when you don't put systems in place for your household, then you are leaving it all on yourself. Systems exist no matter what. A routine is a system or a part of a system. And when I'm coaching on business owners, I have to, when they tell me they don't have enough time and they tell me about the kids, I often ask, how old are these kids? And you'd be surprised the number of times these kids are older than 13. And I know that teenagers are a handful. Listen, I have one. He'll be 17 next week. But teenagers and things like that, that they can help and they understand. And it's a demonstration of where they should set boundaries as well. So if I need from 8 to 9 with teenagers while they're doing their homework, you're going to do your homework. I'm going to work on my business. If you have questions, if it's urgent, let me know. If not, I'll help you at 9 o'clock or whatever time that is in your home. But we have to make the request. We have to be willing to set the boundary or to ask, for everybody to be all in on our dreams, for everybody to help us with the things. And let's be honest, for many of us, we cooked as teenagers. Our parents didn't come home and cook. We at least prepped. And you're trying to do all the things because we don't want our kids to have to do that as another thought. There's a reason it takes a village. And your kids and whoever's in your home and so forth are part of your village and use them to support. I'll give a random example. My son wants to get his hair done. And my sister cousin, she's my sister cousin because we're first cousins and we grew up together. She's coming next week. And my son is like, ooh, I'm going to get Auntie to do my hair. And I'm like, you do that because it's not my wheelhouse, it's hers. And she's a part of my village. So I'm just going to let her do it. Could I do it? Yes. Could I be like, oh, we can't have family come into town and your hair look a mess? I could say that. But she's family and she's going to do it. Right. And so being willing to like say the thing, to ask your village, to build a village, you can build a village that is not family. I have lived in North Carolina for about 20 years now. And my village is made up mostly of friends because I have no family here. Like I have a few people here now, but I didn't starting out. My kids' village, the people that they call auntie and uncle, are friends, right? So you can build a village wherever you live with folks that may not be family because you don't live close to them or because they're not the people you want or can count on to be your village. But I think I'm wanting us to realize that we need to make an effort to be in community, to make a village, whether it's my community, whether it's Aneesha's community, or both, if you're a nurse, right? Community, fellowship is at the base of culture, all cultures. It's why people felt so bad during COVID mentally, is because we were not able to be in community in ways that we want. And so I'm offering from my perspective for every woman listen to this to reevaluate kind of the systems you have in place and where you are cared for in those systems and how the people in the systems are doing their part to manage like their part of the systems or to allow you boundaries or respect your boundaries and your space so that you can care for yourself. I think Aneesha said you had a great saying about your cup half empty and full. Maybe you'll tell it to me again. But I'll stop there and turn it over to Coach Aneesha and see if she has any last words for us.
Anita, I'm like listening. I'm like, I can go on and on and on. This conversation is so good. Two things you said that I kind of got excited over here when you talked about systems and boundaries. They are two things that are like, I think they should be at the core of everyone's being. Like you said, systems are not just in business, but they're also in your home, right? And so how we do things, I allow my kids because I want them to see that when you get out on your own, somebody is not going to do that for you. And so we have chore lists and we have systems in place for the children to start to do things at very young age. So that way when they get older, they don't feel like no one ever taught me how to do that. I didn't know this was something that we had to do. Now, when you get older, if you choose that this is something that I want to outsource, then that's fine, but you are aware of how to do it. Which brings me to another thing is that, like you mentioned, Anita, about community and not just a community that we're both building, but also a community of the support systems that we have around us. Sometimes in that support system, there are services and resources that you can outsource. Like you said, your son is going to have his hair done by your sister cousin. That's fine. That is an outsourced service. You may need to have somebody come pick up your laundry. Yes, somebody come pick up your laundry because that's the service you don't have the capacity, neither do you want to do it. Go ahead and invest in yourself. So we have to think of ways in preventing burnout that we can work smarter, right? And not necessarily harder, or really focus on the things that this is something that I need to do. This is something that I don't have to do. And so let's distinguish, what do I really need to do as opposed to what I can hand off to somebody else, right? What I can allow somebody else. How can I say this? How can I allow someone else to support me in my community? And so you have if all of us look, anybody's listening, we have a ton of people who are surrounding us that are willing to support us. But sometimes we don't want to take that first step to say, can you help? Can you support me? I need your assistance here. And so with this whole conversation, talking about burnout, we've talked about so many great, amazing things today, but make sure that you have systems in place, right? You have procedures, you create boundaries, and you stick with them. So that way you don't end up in burnout. And if you do find that, excuse me, you are in that stage of burnout, take a step back, take a break. And when you get back into the ring, reevaluate where you were and what systems need to be changed so that way you can move forward being more fulfilled in whatever it is you're doing. So Anita, I'm just over here wiggling in my chair because this conversation has been so good. I'm thinking, oh yeah, and that, and this, and that. And so yeah, this has been really, really good.
Thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast. This has been a beautiful conversation. One last thing before we go, and I know I may have said that already, but it's okay. That's what we do. Tell us, Coach Aneesha, how we can either be a part of your community, how we can follow you on Instagram, and do you just serve nurses, or what does it look like in your community?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anita. If you are a nurse and you are looking for a community where you can connect with like-minded nurses for that support and encouragement, you need some help overcoming burnout and stress, you need help balancing your career, while staying true to your faith and who you really are, I absolutely want to connect with you. On my social media, I am Aneesha Nelson RN on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, all social media platforms, as well as thenursescircle.com is where you can find more information about our community and joining us. I would love, love, love to serve you in the Nurses Circle.
So good. And so I'll end with say no more often. Say
Mm.
no more often. I won't give a percentage or how much, but just try saying no. Or if you're at work, I don't have the capacity to do that. Or if I do this, this can get done, and let your boss or someone make a decision. But again, we have to be willing to say the thing um, to whomever that might be in order to get some support, some help from our village, from our community, even from the people at work. So with that, we'll end with confident women lead because they implement systems and boundaries.